I did a recent video on the difference between the overt and the covert narcissist, and I mentioned in that video a certain type of covert narcissist that is extremely dangerous, and that is the spiritual narcissist. This is because they will prey upon the vulnerability and the loneliness of the spiritual seekers, people who are looking to belong, people who are looking to be recognized and seen. So if you consider yourself a spiritual or religious person, please understand that you are at higher risk of meeting these types of narcissists. So in this video, I want to talk about what is a spiritual narcissist, what are some tools they use, what are some things they say, and how you can develop immunity towards spiritual narcissists. Now, several years ago, when I was first starting this channel, I did a video on spiritual narcissists, and I'm going to put that link up here if you want to check it out. Today, I want to go even deeper into this topic. So what is a spiritual narcissist? These are self-absorbed manipulators who use spiritual and religious texts, tenets, dogma as a way of abusing other people. So they will take something that's true or something that you believe in, and then they will pervert that in order to justify their abuse. They could be the leaders and also the people who are in the group, the followers, the people who are seekers as well. So keep in mind, it's not always just that they're drawn to that position of power. They could be in the group and they could be doing these same exact kinds of dynamics. They will always use love bombing to hook you. Just like the other forms of narcissists and other abusers, their particular brand of love bombing will be wrapped in some kind of spiritual jargon. They're going to say all the right words. Of course, they're going to know all that stuff because they've really mastered that in order to recruit victims. So they'll start grooming you into thinking that you're their soulmate or you're really special because you have these spiritual gifts or talents, or they'll do the other kind of love bombing, which is where they look like they're really altruistic and they're flaunting all these good things that they're doing. And so that way you start to think they're a really good person. And you'll also notice that they have a spiritual form of superiority. So if you really believe in, the New Age spirituality or the Buddhism or the religion or whatever that is, be very cautious because they could be playing upon your own subconscious feelings of superiority, that you are somehow chosen or better than everyone else or holier than thou because of your spiritual or religious beliefs. So it's like they will touch in on that sense of narcissism. You could have some narcissistic fleas in that way, and they will touch in on that, and you could think that might be a really positive thing at first. Keep in mind that the spiritual narcissists often have spiritual knowledge, gifts, talents, something special about them, and that can be really confusing. You might think that they're actually a good person because they have whatever those gifts or talents are. They will use triangulation in the group, again, whether they're the leader or one of the followers, to generate a sense of chaos and competition where people are looking for status or favors or recognition or something like that. But it's always going to be wrapped in whatever form of spirituality or religion they find themselves in. So now I want to tell you about some things that spiritual narcissists will say. Remember, a lot of what they say will have a nugget of truth, but it will somehow be perverted in order to justify their abuse. One of the things they say is, you need to be vulnerable to heal. Of course, you need to have a certain level of vulnerability in order to heal, in order to have a deep connection with someone. But when they're saying this, what they're saying is they want you to open up more so that they have more things to use against you as a weapon. They want you to relax on your boundaries. They want you to open a lot more. Another thing they'll say is, if you can't forgive, then you're not spiritual or you're not religious. So some truth in that, but they're also going to use that to do the spiritual bypassing, to get you to overlook the abuse, to just immediately forgive someone who you're not ready to forgive yet. You get to decide when and if you forgive someone. And maybe for you, that isn't exactly the word forgiveness. Maybe for you, it's about working on purging all the heavy, uncomfortable, emotional feelings that you have left after the abuse, after whatever you have endured. But when someone is forcing you to forgive someone right away, that's definitely a red flag. You know, of course, they could be talking about your past when you bring it up, or they could be talking about something that they're doing in real time that they haven't accepted self-responsibility for, therefore you can't forgive them, but they're trying to flip it around on you and tell you that you're not a spiritual person if you don't forgive them. Another thing they'll say is you're aggressive. Anytime you set boundaries or call out abuse or unacceptable behavior in general. They'll also say, you have so much ego, or your ego is so big, or along that same lines, you have so much fear. I had a teacher in Peru who would always use this. And what they're doing is it's a way of dismissing your concerns. You have fear because something's going on and something's not okay, and you bring that up, and they'll flip it around on you and say that it's your ego and you have this dirty fear, and they will shame you for having that fear in front of other people in that group who will also turn against you, because the tenets of that group is, you got to get rid of the fear in order to connect with spirituality. They'll also call you judgmental when you call out abuse for what it is, or when you call out an abuser for who they are. They will not stand for that at all. They'll make you feel guilty and bad for putting a label on that. And as you know, putting a label on the abusive behavior and the abusive person is absolutely inherent in the first stage of healing after narcissistic abuse. They'll tell you you're not spiritual or you're not enlightened if you wear makeup, or if you aren't vegan, or if you're angry, or if you use strong words. And this is all a form of coercive control, to control your behavior so that you fall in line with what they think is that superiority of the spirituality that they have. And when you go to these spiritual or religious communities and you talk about the abuse and you talk about the abuser because you're trying to heal from that, they will say things like, it's no one's fault. Or, everything is a mirror of you. So if you can see that outside of you, then you must be too. And that's just extremely perverted, because what they're doing is avoiding self-responsibility, or they're grooming you so that down the line when they abuse you, because right now you're talking about the past, right? But what they're going to do is groom you to think that it's no one's fault. That way, when they start abusing you, you can't blame them. You can't call them out for that. They accept zero responsibility for their actions. It's also a way of blame shifting and making you feel guilty, because you can't call it out without thinking that it's you too. And that's just really distorted, because that whole idea of the mirror is really wrong. It's because there's a little nuance there. When you're looking in the mirror, you don't see the exact same thing. You see left as if it were right, and right as if it were left. So it's more like a yin yang. It's more like the complement of you. Yes, it's one and whole. But for example, if you lack boundaries, you don't have good boundaries, what's going to happen is you're going to meet someone who abuses boundaries. Now, maybe the divine lesson there is that through that painful, horrible, awful experience with an abusive person, you learn that you have the right to set boundaries, and you start to set boundaries. And of course, there's the opportunity there for the abusive person to learn, though doubtfully they will, that they should stop abusing other people's boundaries. So you see, it's a yin yang. It's not the exact thing. Don't let people make you feel guilty for having known a narcissist or other form of abuser. So the tools that a spiritual narcissist will use are superiority, shaming, guilt tripping, spiritual word salad. So you know how the abusers always use word salad. This form will come cloaked in spirituality. So it will either be quotes from a Bible or some religious text or some other dogma or tenets or belief system, but they'll bombard you with all this stuff in a form of word salad in order to make you feel like they're better than you and you're not good enough and you better get in line with that, or you're going to get kicked out, or you're going to get called not spiritual or something like that. The spiritual bypass is probably by far their favorite tool. That's where they get you to stop looking at what you actually need to look at to really unpack and process in order to heal, and they'll circumvent that. So they'll be avoiding responsibility, they'll be avoiding like the really deep stuff that you need to work on, and that whole push to get you to forgive without actually processing all of that and being able to label things and call them for what they are, that falls into this category. So again, they're going to use this to justify their own abuse down in the future. It always starts with you come to that community talking about the pain that you have from your past. And they're going to start doing this from the very beginning in order to groom you, in order to put up with the exact same thing down the road from them. Another tool is this spirituality as a form of attainment. So for them, it's not about the direct spiritual connection with spirit, source, God, universe, whatever you want to call it. And also they're going to force you to use their terminology and only see things in their way. But they're going to have this focus on gifts, talents, powers, status, fame, things like this that actually have nothing to do with spirituality. Another tool that they'll use is love and light and positive vibes only, which sounds really nice, but they're going to use that and they're going to turn that on you as soon as you start to call out something negative. As soon as you start to call out an abuse, a form of manipulation, some kind of unacceptable behavior, they're going to tell you to just bury that, just put it away. You're bringing too much negative vibes into here. They're going to tell you not to pay attention to that stuff that's going on around you because that's not positive vibes. We don't tolerate that here. You'll notice that they create this environment with a lot of rules, regulations. It's like overly PC. Like you have to be walking on eggshells and very careful not to trigger or upset someone else. Like maybe you wearing a red shirt is triggering for someone else, or you wearing makeup is unacceptable for someone else. So they make up some kind of rule that you have to adhere to these rules in order not to offend or trigger or upset someone else in that group. So again, you start feeling like you're walking on eggshells in that community. You can't really be authentic. You can't be yourself. There's always going to be brainwashing and gaslighting, and like I said, it's always going to be wrapped in spirituality. Polyamory is another tool that they're used. So again, all of these things, it's not that they're inherently bad, but they're going to be used in a perverted way to hurt you. So an upcoming video I'm going to do on polyamory and how they use that as a weapon. Now I want to give you 8 tips in order to develop immunity to spiritual narcissists. Number 1 is stop looking outside yourself for approval or for someone to recognize you or someone to validate you, because that is a major trap with a spiritual narcissist. Number 2, remember that spirituality is about your connection to spirit, source, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, and it's not about attainment or being holier than thou. Those are common traps that they could convince you to fall into. Number 3, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. You need to have mental, emotional, and energetic boundaries so that you don't overshare, you don't over-open, you don't let them in too deep. This is one of the specialties of a spiritual narcissist. When you meet them, you usually feel like you just want to open up and tell them everything about you and share your deepest pain and all of that with them. That's the thing that they're going to use against you. So protect your heart and protect your mind and open slowly in spiritual communities. Number 4, don't get too enmeshed in that culture. That's how spiritual cults will groom you. They will, from the very beginning, get you to be enmeshed. I also recommend the buddy system. Anytime you're going to go to spiritual events or retreats or join a new organization, take a buddy with you, because 1, you have a witness. You have an outside or an additional perspective, because remember, abusers always isolate you from outside perspectives. So 1, you have that person as another perspective and witness, and 2, you don't look like the lone gazelle who's a very easy prey. Number 5, when it's confidential or secret, something shady is probably going on there. There's no reason for you not to be able to tell people about what you're learning about, the practices that go on there. When you start joining organizations and groups that tell you that they can't leave the room, nobody can know the practices we're doing, this is very secret, and other people can't have these kinds of gifts that they could develop if they do this, or whatever they're telling you in order to keep that secret, again, that comes back to that isolation. That's part of the Stockholm Syndrome. When they can isolate you from outside perspectives and keep you only looking to other people in that group to talk about things, that makes you a very easy target for abuse. 6, if it doesn't feel good, get out ASAP. Cut your losses, get out of the group, start doing your own spiritual practice from home, come back to your roots. Maybe eventually you'll find another group, but get out of that group. Don't hang on to some little benefits that you're finding in there if you're finding abuse and you're finding this is not okay for you. Number 7 is be your own connection. Your own direct connection to spirit, source, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, because the spiritual narcissist will always insert themselves as the middleman. You will become reliant on them in order to connect to your higher power, and that's how you know that they're abusing you, by holding that power over you. Number 8, cut the energetic cords with that person, with the group, because the spiritual narcissists usually have strong psychic gifts, psychic connections. They can hoover you without even calling or texting or showing up. They'll send that message to you psychically, and if you are a very open, intuitive, empathic, spiritual person, you're going to be feeling that, even if you can't always identify what's going on. That's the most common form of hoovering from the spiritual types. So be very careful of that, because if you don't cut those cords, that energy is always getting passed back and forth between you guys. So I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, give the video a like, leave a comment below. If you want to leave a comment sharing with other people an experience that you had, something that you recognize from these characteristics, something that I didn't mention that you want to share to help other people who might be going through the same thing, who could run into that same thing in the future, go ahead and leave that comment below. I'm sending you a big hug.